I'm Roger. I'm a holistic vet. I live in Malmesbury. So I travel all over, primarily treating horses and dogs, a few cats, but I also treat people as well. So if you've got any injuries that need doing, then just give me a shout. So Tracy asked me to chair the meeting. I'm not sure that's, in absence of furniture, whether that's quite the right term, but we're here to sort of talk about the farming situation, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the attack on farming in terms of the inheritance tax and other things that are ongoing. And so when I first started as a vet, I was a farm vet. So I've always been interested in farming. It was my first love, if you like, in my veterinary job. But even back in the 1990s, I was acutely aware back then that the government didn't really want a lot of farming. And so I widened what I do. I went down to the New Forest and added horses in, and then discovered holistic way of working in trying to prove that it didn't work. I decided it was better than what I was currently doing. So that was my journey to the holistic side. But I've also been very acutely aware that what's going on to farming is part of a much bigger plan. This has been on the books for a long time, and there are government documents which are talking about reducing meat consumption. They're hoping for zero meat consumption by 2030. They think they can realistically get it down to 16 kilos per person per year, and they think that they can get dairy down to zero as well. And by 2050, they want not just net zero, they want absolute zero, which is total madness. So this is a much bigger plan, and so farmers are so busy on their farms. I know how hard they work. They haven't had time to go into what's going on and understand that this is a plan that goes all the way back to the technocracy, and before that to the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, and there are documents from them where they will say in their own words that this is what they're trying to do. And they chose climate as the vehicle behind which to unite the people in order to get them to accept the losses of freedoms and their rights. And that is in the Club of Rome's own words and in their own documents. So it's not conspiracy theory, this is actually what they're trying to do. So I've been doing some talks along with Mark, who will talk in a bit about the farming side of things, trying to wake the farming community up to what is going on and show them the proof of documents that exist as to what's going on. So it's an important issue. I'm also being concerned from what's going on from the animal point of view, from the veterinary point of view. I've been trying to keep the Veterinary Medicines Directive on their toes, and I've questioned them about PCR testing, why we're using PCR testing. And I managed to get them to admit that they have done no work on the PCR test in terms of its authorization. They suggested I talk to the manufacturer to find out what the false positive rate was. So it's not suitable to be used in a clinical situation, and yet they haven't checked it to make sure it does what it says on the tin, but they'll happily put a restriction movement order, or they'll put some sort of slaughter order in place as a result of what they might find on the testing. So it's really not what it's supposed to be. When we come to Byford, I've also challenged them as to why, which is the food additive, which the manufacturers themselves categorised in their own category.
Excuse me, I think you ought to explain what a PCR test is. Not many people know.
PCR test is PCR test. It's the test that people did for COVID, but it's they use it for all sorts of other conditions as well. So,
but you were then saying about restrictions for TB.
Yeah, they'll use the PCR test to check for things like high pathogen avian influenza, HPAI, and then they'll use it for the results of those tests as the basis for putting restrictions and things. So it's a test which shouldn't be used in a clinical situation, and that was again on video with the guy who developed it and got the Nobel Prize for developing it, saying that as well. So coming back to Byford, it's the food additive that stops the cows from burping and the methane, and it's again completely unnecessary. And I challenged them as to why the Veterinary Medicines Directive hadn't classified it as a medicine, And they said, well, because they self-classified it as a feed additive. And I said, well, where's the health tests on the to say that it's safe for the cows? Because it's actually mandated in Denmark, and the Danish farmers are already saying that they're getting cows that are dying from using it. And so they came back to me, and actually the chief veterinary officer admitted to me that there has been no health and welfare assessment done on the cows themselves for Bovaer. So I'm very concerned. I'm trying to keep on their toes, keep up to date, and also to let farmers know what's going on, because this is an attack. It's not a miscalculation. It is entirely deliberate. And so, I think people need to be aware. If people want me to do a talk at some point and go into it a lot more detail, I have got some talks on YouTube and things already, but I'm more than happy if people want me there in person to do talks and arrange talks to talk to farmers and actually explain what's going on and show them the proof. I've done that a couple of times around the country. So without further ado, I shall call up my good friend Mark, and who's the bowler hat farmer.
Come down here so the people come behind can hear. Please move down here.
And I'll rest my voice.
Please.
Hello everybody, and good evening. So my partner Gloria and I have been travelling the UK for the past 6 months nearly now, looking at something which I found concerning, and following on from what Roger was saying just now, the desecration of the farming industry. And I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about it, and a lot of people don't want to own it, and a lot of people don't want to face up to it, but sadly it's happening, and we're seeing it on so many different levels. So I decided that I was going to go on a quest, travel the country, do some speeches, and to start questioning farmers about what their thoughts were, their fears were. And as we've travelled around the country, we've come across some absolute remarkable things as well, where farmers are transitioning their businesses across to a new style of farming. The concerning things we've seen travelling the country is solar destruction. It's not solar farming. Don't believe a thing they tell you. We were in Lincolnshire, 7,000 acres of prime agricultural land been taken over. Derbyshire, 12,000 acres. Lancashire, 15,000 acres. We were down in Kent last week. This goes on and on and on. Where's the food going to come from, guys? Unfortunately, I appreciate there's a lot of money in it, but we'll just talk about that quickly. Gloria and I are in Truro, and I went to visit a farm down there, an organic farm, and I said to the guy, I'm really surprised that you've got solar panels on the farm. And he said, we haven't. And he laughed. And I said, what's the funny? He said, well, they were supposed to be on my field over there, but my next door neighbour got greedy and put them on his field over there. And the electric company, what installed them as a Chinese investment company, they closed the company down no sooner was it put in place, and he's never been paid. 200 acres of agricultural land, what no one's now earning on or can now not produce on. For those who don't know, it's up to £1 million an acre to uninstall solar in the future. And farmers will tell you, oh yeah, but it's down to the electric company. Read the small print, it isn't. On the positive side of what we've seen, when we were in Truro, we've seen farmers that are coming out of dairy, which saddened me, but have got beef cattle grazing, have got chickens grazing behind them to make good use of the soil and the land. We was in, so we've gone from Land's End up to Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall, we witnessed an amazing farm up there, 1,000 head of milking cows, what they were milking on a daily basis, and none of the 5.2 million litres a year they produce goes into the supermarket supply chain. Brilliant. One of the things which we're seeing across the country is farmers are starting to pull back from the supermarkets, and there is lots of options out there, and I know Nick's going to talk about this. There's lots of options out there for farmers to start looking at the production of their land. And I know a lot of farmers go, oh, vegetable farming's hard work. It is. But the community side of this is where this comes into play, I believe, and we're seeing this all over the country, is that community projects are desperate to set up but are short of land. And that's where I believe a lot of you guys who are sitting on large amounts of land, 4, 5 to 10 acres of land is not a lot to put aside for growing veg, and if it's done properly, especially the chemical-free farming side, as we've witnessed all across the country, you can grow a vast amount of food on that. Now, my uncle sadly died in January, whose farm I was on, gave me 1 acre of land and said to me, prove to me you can grow vegetables on that acre of land and we'll give you some more land. And we'd got thick clay, so dense you couldn't do anything with it, so I thought not going to be beaten by that. We bought into the mix 5 Arctic loads of compost, put it on the ground nearly 9 inches deep, grew in that, fantastic veg. We earned £30,000 off of that 1 acre in the first year, including the setup, and unfortunately Uncle was still earning £160 an acre out of growing wheat. The numbers are there, you've just got to make the decisions. There's lots of people queuing up to want to get involved in projects like that. We've certainly set up a CIC to assist in achieving that, putting the farmers together with the people who want to do that. So that's what we're going to be spending the time on. My next part of this tour is to go back to Truro, down to Land's End, and we're going all the way up to John O'Groats to meet all the farmers along the way through Scotland. So that must be 10 minutes. I'm Mark, have a good evening.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to put in a plug here for the meat side of things because I'm carnivore. So, but grass-fed beef is the best, you know, and actually not tilling the soil and keeping the land as grassland actually helps to sequester carbon. So it is absolutely positive in what you should be doing. So I would put a plug in for going regenerative on the meat side of things as well. But our next speaker is
behind you.
Introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are, and we'll listen to what you've got to say.
Fine, yes, thank you very much. I recognise a few faces here. Adrian Steele, organic farmer, and I work for the Soil Association, also looking at supply chains. Okay, Adrian Steele, I'm an organic farmer, and I work for the Soil Association, and I'm also a lawyer. I recognise a movement when I see one, and the organic was a very, very strong, well-developed movement back in the 1960s, 1970s, and has continued, but has, at the moment, reached a very difficult point in its evolution. And I think one of the problems with the evolution of a movement which is around agroecology, around holistic farming systems, is it's complicated for policyholders to get their heads around. It's complicated to do. We've seen how much hard work it is producing vegetables, and the reward has always been in the hands of other people if you take it out of your own control, out of your own supply chains. I spent a very long time in my life developing producer groups to be able to supply Tesco or to be able to supply Sainsbury's. Our lambs were the first into Sainsbury's, our potatoes were also the first into Sainsbury's in Ladbroke Grove back in the 1990s. And I would have to say that I spent a long time building these networks up and then a long time regretting having done it. And I think there's a lesson in there for people who are looking into these new movements we've been hearing about earlier, which I'm not entirely familiar with, but I always appreciate people with great ideas and who can mobilise opinion, make people aware of the complications and, well, even more so, a sense of crisis that's actually engaging farming at the moment. So one of the areas I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be needing to talk about, and actually it's about routes to market, I'm understanding, and things like that. So yeah, okay. So I'll do one of those crowd surfing things in a minute. Glastonbury's next week. So I just wanted to say something that the good that's happened, and also something bad at the same time. It's retrieving something good from a bad situation. The bad situation is that farmers engaging with their market need to have processors, and you need to have good relationship with processors, and you need to have a local processor. In the old days, resilience was defined by that. So when we were under threat in world wars, every little region, no matter what one bit might have been knocked out, the other bit was still there. There's lots of sort of theory around this, system theory and so on. But we've reached a situation now where a few little well-timed bombs, I hate to talk about this at the moment because it's so awful what's happening, but a few well-placed bombs on a supermarket hub or a motorway intersection will paralyse this country. And so we're very vulnerable, even though we think we're very efficient. So we just fought just a little campaign, it's a small one, against the idea of efficiency equals scale, and actually small scale has no value, or at least has no added value. Then the medium we were campaigning in this time was abattoirs, because there are now only 47 small abattoirs left. They are a lifeline for many, many farmers who want to get back into connecting to consumers and to a value-added chain. So I could probably talk quite a long time about this, but I won't. Just simply to say that the Treasury, we're talking about the idea of full cost recovery. It's a kind of economic neoliberalism, which I think is also displayed around many of our supply chain thinking, but also partly government thinking. We were able to come back to the Food Standards Agency to help them to develop arguments against the Treasury. The reason they wanted to do this was because they realised they'd lost the farmers around the inheritance tax issue, and they wanted to not have another bad PR situation with the small abattoirs going bust. Because if the Treasury proposal won, all the small abattoirs were going to go bankrupt. 40% of all the abattoirs in the country were going to go bankrupt. Out of just stupid orthodox thinking that only 4% of animals are slaughtered through them, 96% go through the main processes. Why bother with the small guys? It's just a lot of nuisance and inspection charges. And the reason we won the argument was because we widened the debate out to about diversity and consumer choice and consumer protection, and as well as local food economies and local farming and food resilience. Talking about the development of farm shops, for instance, a big growth area. Farm shops when I was a kid in the Vale of Evesham was like, you had too many plums, you just put a little tent like that up or a bit of corrugated iron and a few boxes and hope people will come along and pay you some money. Farm shops now, the Farm Retail Association, are really, really well-defined, well-developed businesses, and they act as hubs, and particularly for meat. So meat is actually driving the sales in these farm shops. And at the same time, independent butchers are going bust. So there's a connection to be made there between the growth and the opportunity to still use small abattoirs with farm shops, a growing market, often associated with cafes and so on as well. So we ran these arguments through. We ran the arguments around animal welfare, the fact that you don't need to move animals very far to a small abattoir that's local to you, taking them up into Wales to the big, or down to Cornwall is expensive and stressful for the animals. We managed to get these arguments taken into account in their thinking, as well as an acknowledgement that abattoirs play a strategic role in the nation's resilience. So we've won one battle. The board, the Food Standards Agency board on Thursday approved our reasoning behind this, and it got a stay of execution for the small abattoirs. There's another round of consultations to go, but that's just indicative of the pressure that supply chains independent of the supermarkets are under, and also farmers who are independent of quite dominating supply chain forces are under as well. And I recognise it's a difficult time for farming at the moment. Organic is no exception. We've had the suspension of the sustainable farming incentives hit us particularly hard. For the first time in 30 years, there's no payments for converting to organic farming. So that's our work campaigning on at the moment. I think it's also areas where a lot of people want to get involved and help out, but don't quite know how to. So we've got several very good campaigns at the moment, exposing the lobbying that the industry is putting onto to DEFRA in relation to advertising of junk food. And this also applies to promotions around whole foods, any food that's closer to the farmer and the customer that hasn't gone through a lot of processing. So it's a big campaign for us at the moment around trying to avoid ultra-processed foods where you can. It's not a faddish thing, it's literally to try and improve the line of communication and direct supply between what's on farm and what people actually eat. Because the less interventions there are, the better for you. And actually, in theory, the food should be cheaper. The fact that it's not is a whole other story. But I think I've probably had my 10 minutes.
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the problems we've got is that food security for the country, we're currently producing less than 60% of food for the country, and it's down less than 40% now. It's gone down. So one of the other plans for the net zero is also to stop shipping and flying. So if we're not producing the food here and there's no shipping and there's no flying, I'm not quite sure how they think the food is going to be. And of course, there's been quite a lot of investment in things like Frankenfood, where they think they can print meat or put it all together. So, what we need farmers doing food, not solar, and we need food security. We need to get back to where we were. But I'm now going to hand over to Nick, who's going to finish us off, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A after that. Thanks, Smokey.
Hello, I'm Nick Wier, and I'm here to talk about how we can collectively build an alternative to the supermarkets. I'm a part-time grower on a community-supported agriculture project, and I helped to set up a food hub in my hometown Stroud about 18 years ago. I now make a living by travelling the country and working with groups to build alternative food systems locally. Most of it is online. Most of it starts off with the producer. And in some cases, the producer will set up an online shopfront selling just their own produce from their farm to the people, to the businesses, to the schools, to the hospitals around them. In some cases, those producers will develop what we call a hub, a food hub, which means they're selling not only their own produce, but they're selling produce from other producers in their local area, so that the people coming to buy the produce at the online shopfront have a range of produce: meat, vegetables, cheese, eggs, cake, beer, wine, as much of it made as locally as possible. Some of these food hubs are based at schools, and they're run either by the students themselves, the senior members of the school, the sixth form colleges, running it as a little micro business, sometimes as a PTA, Parent Teachers Association business, to raise funds for the school. But again, bringing in the producers, using the school premises as a sorting area where the produce is delivered from the producers into that area. It's then bagged and boxed and then goes out to the shoppers and the buyers. In some cases, these hubs are a bit like farmers markets, but online. In some cases, they are actual face-to-face farmers markets with an online shop front to supplement the farmers market, so that people who don't want to come to the market can order online. People who don't live close enough can order on the online farmers market. The produce is collected together at the market, and then the producers take it back to their farms and offer it as a pickup point for people at a distance from the market. These food hubs are struggling because a lot of people are conditioned by the supermarkets that food should be cheap, and a lot of people are struggling with the cost of living at the moment. So many of these food hubs are addressing this by linking up with food banks and distributing food surplus to people who can't afford to pay full price for their food, and asking the people who can pay full price to pay it forward. And I'm amazed at the level of altruism and goodwill of communities who want to support people in their communities who are struggling financially. So these food hubs have a system where the people who can pay full price for their food do so. Some of them pay it forward and pay a bit extra. They pay for a veg box for a neighbour they haven't met yet. Other people can choose to pay a reduced price for their food, and other people can pay nothing at all if they can't afford it. The way the food hubs do this preserves food dignity, so that the people, when they come to collect the food from the food hub, nobody knows who's paid full price, who's paid half price, who hasn't paid at all. And it builds community. You end up not having food banks for poor people and farmers markets for rich people. The other way the food hubs are making it work is that a lot of public sector buyers are getting increasingly interested in buying high quality, locally produced food for their schools, for their hospitals, for their prisons, for their care homes. The problem these buyers have is that a lot of the local growers and farmers and producers can't produce enough volume. So a school needs 100 kilos of carrots every week, and there's no one grower necessarily locally who can do that. But these food hubs are networks of producers. They bring together multiple producers. So the hub has a contract with the school or the hospital. They deal with all the paperwork because generally people who grow and produce food don't like admin. So the hub does the admin and has the relationship with the buyer. The orders come into the hub then collects 15 kilos from this producer, 5 kilos from that producer, 30 kilos from that producer, assembles it all together and then delivers it to the hospital. The benefit for the hospital is that they are getting a more resilient local supply chain, so that when the shit hits the fan and there aren't carrots coming in from Holland or from Gambia, there will still be food available for them. And the producers get a guaranteed market. Quite often these contracts are 2, 3, 4 year contracts at a guaranteed price, which means the producer can then scale up. They can grow more food, they then get economies of scale. We heard the farmers, the growers here talking about how difficult it is to grow on a small scale. If we can get these big contracts in through the hubs to the local growers, that makes it a lot more viable. Brings the prices down, keeps the income up for the farmers and the growers, but makes all of us have a much more resilient food system, so that we're not relying on imports, we're not relying on supermarkets who have proved time and time again that their just-in-time ordering means that any crises means that we have empty shelves within 3 days. If we can all think about how we can build these hubs, whether you're a farmer or a grower who wants to set up your own online shopfront to sell your own produce and or the produce of your neighbours, or whether you're a concerned member of the public who wants to set up one of these shopfronts, they don't all have to be set up by producers. Many of them are set up by interested individuals who care enough about their local food system that they will just go ahead and make it happen. They will approach the farmers, they will set it up, they will deal with all the admin. They'll make a bit of money out of it because the food hubs make a markup on the producer's selling price. The producers set their selling price, the hub then negotiates with them a markup that they will add to that price that will cover their running costs, pay for the people who are actually going to do the administration of it. But all of these things are possible, and I'd be very happy to talk to anybody who'd like to know more about how you can get involved. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Right, if I can ask the speakers to come up here, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A, but while they're coming up, I'd just like to thank Tracy for inviting everybody here and giving us the opportunity to speak to you too, because this is really important. This is about our future and about our food security, and it's, you know, we need these opportunities, and there's nothing like face-to-face. We can see things online, but there is nothing like being face-to-face and seeing people and getting that community feeling. So, you know, thank you for all coming as well.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got any questions, Tracy.
Okay, plant question here. But actually, I would also like to say that if anybody wants to have a regular box of vegetables, there's an example on the table, I think, over there. And I think it's called a medium. And I think it's 15 quid a week. And actually, I spoke to Nick Wier earlier, and I said, I really am tempted to just throw all of the complications away of going to Bristol and having boxes and the honesty box and farmers markets where we bring peanuts. And he actually says the best thing is to keep the diversity. So a little bit with him and a little bit, and so, you know, I'm definitely listening. So, but I would like to ask a question which Mike Hawker brought up to me. So, and that is that if he sells cattle and the supermarkets get rid of every single bit of his cow, his beef, how can he possibly relocalize that and get the money back that he, even though the supermarket is not paying the proper price for him? Mike, do you want to say it better than me?
No. Come on, Mike. Come on, Mike.
I didn't expect this,
So, I think, Tracy, what you were trying to say was, actually what you did say, was that if you sell an animal, let's say at the moment the price is sky high, so we'll just say a 300 kilo animal it would be 600 kilos live weight, so 300 kilos of meat would say come to £2,000. By the time you've chopped that up, slaughtered it, carted it to there, done this, done that, how do you sell? I can see that the fillet steaks and all the steaks would go very easily, but you're also left with a heck of a lot of other meat that you wouldn't necessarily want. how would you
Yeah, this is where you need to get hold
get
of
rid of all the
That's
other
right.
stuff?
This is where you need to get in contact with a processor, because a processor, that's their job.
Because the abattoir isn't represented here.
No.
It's going to come with me. That is the problem of the abattoir. And the abattoir is being forced out by other pressures.
Yeah,
Completely
huge
different.
amount of pressure.
Housing,
Yeah.
Housing being the biggest thing on the edge of Bristol. Is it? Do the Jarretts take yours?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When they can write the right price. So it's the pricing out of the abattoir,
Yeah.
because the abattoir owner is going and looking there to try and make his business, because his margins are under pressure too.
You're not being private kill now, you mean?
I'm saying the local abattoir,
Oh, I see, yeah.
the biggest abattoir in China, locally.
Yeah, if the question's around private kill, then I mean our local butcher is like a pie maker, and you could go to the really good farm shops, it's sausages, stuff like that. So someone has to do that. So I think it's very difficult as a farmer in isolation to do something, unless you've got like a family who don't want to get paid for a while they build a business up or something. Making the transition into these small markets is very, very difficult, and I think that's why I'm quite interested by the growth in the sector of these big farm shops, because they can take a bit of volume, and they definitely want provenance. And I think if you look at some of the places like Gloucester Services, if you look down in Devon, there's a great place between Exeter and Exmouth where they're actually celebrating the grazing that the cattle have in the fields around and about the restaurant where they're selling the beef. So I think, in answer to your question, yes, it's always been very, very difficult since BSE. All the problems around disposal of bits of the carcass, the cost facing abattoirs are all the time going up, but that shouldn't be a reason for them all to close, or for your supply chain to go out, because it's a vital supply chain. The nutrition, the landscape, the heritage, and the quality of local production in hefting with the local landscape. Once that's gone, it's gone. And I think that we have to fight for that, and that's what campaigning organisations like probably all of us are trying to do on your behalf. And so, yeah, and it's trying to find that there's always a solution to any problem, basically. It just takes a bit of finding, and sometimes other people to help you find that solution. You're not alone. I mean, lots of people will be facing these concerns.
Nick Weir, do you have anything to say on that?
No, nothing to add.
No, okay. And when you do come, will you go slightly down the steps so that people over there can see you from behind the bush?
Can I just add something on
Come
that?
down.
Can I just add something to that? Part of the problem is, because we've been slaughtering lambs for 30 years and selling privately, part of the problem is education, because a lot of the modern housewives these days don't know how to cook the cheaper cuts. And a lot of it is down to education. We have people ask in the past, what do you do with the neck, or what do you do with the breast of lamb? And the modern people don't know how to cook it, basically. A lot of it is education.
Sadly, that's all been geared that direction.
Yeah.
It's been deliberate, right from school. We had cookery classes when we were at school. We were taught that the gas of life comes from carbon dioxide. Now it's our enemy. So you've got to understand how we bring it all back. But what I would say on your side for the cattle is there is lots and lots, as Nick will clarify on this, lots and lots and lots of hubs out there now that are desperate to find farmers that want to supply stuff. What they're struggling to find is the farmers who actually produce the stuff. Can I just have a quick show of hands on something, please? Because this is important. We've done this all over the country, at every speech we've done. Is there anybody here what would like to buy, if they could, chemical-free food, direct, indirect, from a farmer? Because that's an important question to ask.
You can buy it from yourself.
And on that note, the young lady who did the great speech earlier, and Nick will clarify, as we found out, it's difficult to sell chemical-free organic food. Why? We've spoken in front of now nearly 11,000 people, and every person's put their hand up. Why?
It's expensive.
Education. Back to what you were saying.
Expensive. It's twice the price.
But why is it twice the price?
It
Because the
also
government
comes
is
down-
subsidising Tesco's.
It also comes down to education, because meat is a very nutrient dense product, and when it's produced regeneratively, it is one of the most nutritious products that you can eat. And when it's that nutritionally dense, you don't need to eat so much. So it does come down to education, and also there's been a lot of demonising about animal fat in the diet as well, and actually completely the wrong thing. We need more animal fat in our diet. There's a great book which some of you might laugh at and some of you might cry at, which is called Why Vegans Have Smaller Brains, and and it's based on an Oxford study where they showed that the human brain, we evolved as hyper carnivore people, and through that evolution of eating primarily meat and eating brain and eating bone marrow, because we haven't got the teeth and claws the same as other carnivores, but what we could do was get to the carcasses and eat those other bits, and that developed our brain. And then when agriculture came along and we moved very much more towards the plant side of things, the brain shrank by 11%. And so there's also been studies showing that babies who are breastfed by vegan mothers have decreased brain development as well. It's actually a medical problem. So it is a problem. So we need to undemonize animal fat and realize that meat is actually a very nutrient dense food, and get back to understanding our food, and then cooking the other cuts that aren't so popular as well.
Right at the beginning, you suggested that there's a body of people who are trying very hard to reduce meat consumption. Why?
So they can push their agenda and tell us what they want.
Yeah, it's all to do with money, and it's all to do with control. They've invested a lot in these Franken meats. Bill Gates has bought up a hell of a lot of land. He's probably one of the biggest farm landowners now in the States, and he's very much promoting the whole Frankenfood idea. And if you look at Sainsbury's, if you look at their report for the future, they are talking about having zero meat and zero dairy
And zero farmers.
and zero farmers. They're talking about growing plants and algae in vertical growing facilities and industrializing the whole thing, and it will be run by robots and AI and all the rest of it. This part of the madness that they bought into, and they genuinely believe that they can do it, and that's the dangerous bit. They actually believe that this is possible, and they have no understanding of nutrition, but they also understand that if people don't have nutrition, then they'll be chronically ill, and then they can sell the drugs, and then they can sell everything else. So it all comes down to money. Just always follow the money, and unfortunately that's the root of it all.
Thank you.
Is that it? Anyone?
But all this is, you're saying this is deliberate.
Yes.
And it's deliberate by the government.
Yes.
And by mass media.
Yes.
And even higher, but the government is controlled by those people.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on who you vote for, and it doesn't matter if you vote Conservative or any of the three parties now, they all will do the same agenda.
There are possibilities to have other ways of doing things. I know one chap, David Carter, who lives not far from here. He's put together a website and a Substack called the Truth Council, or the Truth Contract, and he's talking about having different ways of delivering democracy, where the people would vote a little bit like they do in Switzerland, and then there would be politicians who aren't have any allegiance to any one party, but who would then be contracted to vote according to how the people voted on their apps and things. So there are potentially other ways of developing the politics of it, but it does need work. It needs the support of the people. The mass media is
all paid for by the same people.
Yeah.
It's all part of the machine. And we've just had the Bilderberg group, which have met, and all the main people for all the industries, top industries, and governments and media have been there. They don't produce any reports, and yet one of the items on their discussion was depopulation. So we know what they're discussing. We know what this is all about. They have this Malthusian idea that there's too many people on the planet. And again, there's another report by one of the guys in the Club of Rome Dennis Meadows, who's on video saying we're at 8 billion now, we need to get down to 1. And he wrote a report called The Limits to Growth, and it was published in 1972. So that is the mindset of these people, and it isn't conspiracy because it's in their documents. And the Club of Rome is still one of the main contributors to the United Nations.
So how do they think they're going to achieve this?
Disease, pestilence, poor nutrition, digital identity, assisted dying bill. It's already happening in Canada. No cash control. The social scoring system has already been introduced in China. All the software was written by Infosys, which just happens to be owned by or founded by Rishi Sunak's father-in-law. So, it's the systems have probably already been put in place. You see Infosys already being advertised. If you're watching the Queen's tennis tournament last week, in the background it had Infosys on the side. So it's already been put in place. This is what all the facial recognition is about. It's why do you think that when we were all in lockdown, they were still putting up all the 5G masts, because they need the infrastructure to be able to do it. They've got all the, they've got the ability. They couldn't do it before because they didn't have the technology. And this is what we need to wake up to, because it isn't conspiracy theory. It is absolutely in their reports, and it is in government documents, and it is in government sponsored organisations that are delivering it. All these the idea that there's non-governmental organisations, there's no such thing. They are part of the government. They just call themselves non-governmental organisations because they're working with the government. But that's what they're trying to do, and it's all being driven by money.
There's no clouds in lockdown, was there?
Not when they wanted to keep us happy.
But how do you bring somebody in power who is going to do the right things? I mean, it's all about voting.
That's why we've got to decentralise. This is where decentralisation is so important. And so we've got to find new ways of doing things where things are that much more locally responsible, and very much less less centralised and more decentralised. It's the only way, because central power corrupts, and the more you do it, the more it corrupts. And we've seen that. We know exactly what's going on. We're seeing it on the world stage all the time.
Roger, one thing I would add on the decentralisation of everything, this all comes down to where you guys spend your money. Everything comes down to where you spend your money and how you spend your money.
Yep, cash.
Spend it in cash, spend it locally, spend it with the people you know. Don't give it to the supermarkets.
Yeah.
Cash is king. Cash is king.
Thank you so much. I mean, maybe everybody wants to chat, so shall we end it? But obviously the speakers are